watching ABC News Live.
Tonight, the high-stakes presidential face-off, years in the making.
Because we are all Americans, and together we will show November 5th to be the most important day in the history of America.
He's coming for your money, your health care, and your Social Security. And we're not going to let it happen.
One of the most consequential nights of the 2024 presidential election so far, with President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump about to go toe-to-toe just minutes from now, with Biden making his case for a second term, expecting to take Trump on. As Donald Trump looks to energize his base and convince those undecided voters at home that he's the one best positioned to return to the White House and deliver on his MAGA promises.
This is not living in a country that we grew up in, and we're not going to stand for it. We're not going to stand for it. We're going to take our country back. We're going to take our country back.
I'll be damned if I'm going to let Donald Trump be the reason to stop being.
The future of the country in either man's hands as millions of voters tune in tonight. We're covering it all as the clock ticks down. This is a special edition of Prime, the race for the White House. We are now 2 hours from the most consequential moment of the 2024 campaign season so far, the first head-to-head debate between President Biden and former President Donald Trump. And you can stream it all right here on ABC News Live. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us for our special ABC News Live coverage, the race for the White House. There are few moments the candidates have close to the undivided attention of the majority of the country. This is one of those nights. The stage is set in Atlanta, Georgia for the 90-minute debate hosted by CNN. There will be no audience in the room. The candidate microphones will be cut while they're not speaking. President Biden arrived at Dobbins Air Reserve Base in Marietta, Georgia late this afternoon after spending the better part of the week in a debate prep at Camp David. Trump touched down in Atlanta late today. He says he's been preparing for his whole life for this. Our powerhouse political team is standing by. Rick Klein will have the state of this razor-thin race in a moment, and we'll hear from both sides tonight about what they can expect from their candidate. But first, ABC's Rachel Scott leads us off tonight from Atlanta.
President Biden arriving in Atlanta surrounded by cheering supporters. Just hours before tonight's history-making debate. For the first time, a sitting president and a former president squaring off on the debate stage. The White House tonight saying the stakes could not be higher.
So I'm on my way to Atlanta. You probably have heard, about the debate.
The First Lady with this message for Americans watching at home.
So I want you tonight, when you see them both debating, I want you to hear Joe's words. But most of all, I want you to listen to his heart.
Donald Trump touching down here in Atlanta just minutes ago. For months, the former president has mocked Biden's stamina and questioned his mental fitness. But as the debate approached, Trump's tone changed.
I assume he's going to be somebody that will be a worthy debater. Yeah, I would say. I think I don't want to underestimate him.
Tonight, the two candidates will stand behind podiums 8 feet apart. There will be no studio audience. Trump has complained about that. But sources close to the campaign tell me they hope it keeps him on message. And another big difference, the candidates' microphones will only be turned on when it's their turn to speak, an effort to prevent another scene like this.
Radical left. Will you shut up, man? Listen,
President Biden tonight seeking to draw a direct contrast with his rival, preparing to call out Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election and the Capitol riot on January 6th.
He's willing to sacrifice our democracy, put himself in power.
Trump's team telling me they've prepared for those attacks, and they're advising Trump to focus on other issues: immigration, crime, and the economy.
We had the greatest economy ever, and he's got an economy that is so bad with inflation.
Donald Trump and President Biden have not seen each other since they last stepped off the debate stage 4 years ago. And tonight, they'll meet again in the most consequential moment yet of this campaign.
Rachel Scott joins us now from the debate spin room in Atlanta. So, Rachel, tell us a little more about these ground rules, what the candidates can and can't do, even during the commercial breaks.
During the commercial breaks, the candidates will not even be allowed to speak with their advisors or their aides. They will not be allowed to bring any pre-written notes with them on that debate stage. Once they get behind those podiums, they will be allowed to write things down. There, of course, will be no studio audience to cheer them on, and their microphones will only be turned on when it is their turn to speak. So we will have to see whether or not those mock debates that President Biden has been doing will pay off, and which version of Donald Trump shows up tonight. The combative version of the former president we saw back in 2020 on the attack, or a much more measured version of the former president who wants to stay on message, Lindsay.
So pen, paper, water, back to the basics. Rachel, our thanks to you.
When there was a line, about 15 people. You can check into any one of our 4 stations. Hey, how are you? Good.
I drove.
And you can check in right here at this first.
Joining us now is Representative from the state of Washington, Pramila Jayapal. Thank you so much for joining us. You're the chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, and as such, you're more progressive than President Biden on many issues. Let's start with immigration. The president recently announced executive actions that make asylum claims far harder for migrants who cross the border unlawfully and will turn many away. How do you explain, in your opinion, that the president's policies would still be better than former President Trump's?
Well, I think what the president has clearly shown is he has compassion. He wants to fix the problem. He put forward a day one immigration reform bill right when he got elected, and Republicans have refused to move that forward. Republicans do not want this issue to be fixed. And so I think the president is working with the tools that he has, but I think he'll make it clear that even when there was a bipartisan bill written by the second most conservative senator, Republican senator in the United States Senate, it was Donald Trump who said, don't vote for this bill, don't allow it to pass, because we want immigration to stay out there as an election issue and try to use it to divide people.
And to the chagrin of many progressives, the president has gone much further in supporting Israel in their war against Hamas, both in providing weaponry and not calling for an immediate ceasefire. What do you say to those traditionally Democratic voters who are angry with the president and are considering not voting for him or perhaps not voting at all?
Well, I listen to where they are. Of course, I share some of those feelings with them in terms of the frustration with where we are. But I will tell you that we have 2 candidates running for president. One, the former president, is somebody who wants to destroy democracy. In his own words, he has said he wants to be a dictator on day one. We have Joe Biden, who has shown us that he cares about democracy. He wants to strengthen it. He wants to make sure that it works and that we count everyone's votes. 2, we have the former president who wants to destroy our freedoms. In fact, he already has. He's the one who appointed those Supreme Court justices, those extreme right-wing Supreme Court justices, who actually took away our fundamental right to make choices about our own bodies and our reproductive freedom. Joe Biden is ready to make sure that we codify abortion rights into law, and he has been doing everything he can to make sure that we protect all of our freedoms. And 3, Donald Trump has driven up the deficit with his tax scam, added $2 trillion to the deficit, and we have Nobel laureates who have come out, economists who have come out and said that he would be absolutely disastrous for the economy. Whereas Joe Biden has brought unemployment down to the lowest level in over 50 years. He's created unprecedented numbers of jobs. He's made sure that wages are continuing to go up. He's been for unions. He is building this economy from the middle out and the bottom up.
And many voters continue to tell pollsters that Trump could better handle the economy than Biden. What's your pitch to them?
Well, what I say to people is that Trump showed us exactly what he did. He plunged the country into an even deeper deficit with his tax scam, which gave so much money to the very top, most wealthiest people in this country. So he talks a good game, but let's not forget that we're talking about a convicted felon who has already been charged on multiple counts, and somebody who incited an insurrection and tried to destroy our democracy. Joe Biden is a clean, clear hand. He cares about people. He's deeply compassionate. That's my own personal experience with the president, even when I disagree with him. This is a president who cares about working people. He wants to give people a fair shake, and he absolutely will uphold our democratic values.
At one time, more union voters or members voted Democratic. The president did earn the support of the United Auto Workers and was the first president to walk a picket line. But many union members now vote Republican and support Trump. How does the president reverse that trend?
Well, the president has gotten most of the major labor unions, all of the ones that have endorsed, have largely endorsed President Biden. And that's because, sure, there might be some members here and there who are still looking to see what's done. But I think we need to remind people about what Joe Biden has done. Not only was he the first president to walk a picket line, he was the first president to actually call out that these corporations needed to share some of the profits with their workers, with unions. Contracts negotiated have been some of the best because the Biden administration has been helpful in settling those contracts. Also, Democrats under Joe Biden's leadership saved pensions for millions of Teamsters across this country. And so I think there is a real record here that shows that Joe Biden is the labor candidate. He is the one that is going to make sure that workers continue to get the right to organize and have the power to do so, whereas Republicans and Donald Trump just want to take that away from workers across the country.
Congresswoman Jayapal, we thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
This is expected to be a game-changing summer as Americans prepare to vote in one of the most polarizing elections that will determine the future of the country. We are just a little over 100 days from the November presidential election, and President Biden is juggling both domestic issues along with wars abroad, while former President Trump faces an upcoming sentencing and his felony conviction in New York, among other legal battles. And in the midst of all of this, once again, the state of Georgia is on the national stage for this historic debate in Atlanta between the two candidates. Joining us now is Georgia Republican Governor Brian Kemp. Governor, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, glad to be with you.
So let's start with an election where neither candidate is very popular, and many voters may be choosing to avoid politics altogether because of the extreme divisions. How does either candidate appeal to voters in a critical state like Georgia at this stage in the race? And what do you expect people to walk away from tonight's debate with?
Well, it's going to be fascinating to see what happens tonight, and who knows what they're going to walk away with. I do think there's a great opportunity, though, for former President Trump to make the case that the American people and the citizens of our state here in Georgia can't afford another 4 years of Joe Biden. Now, obviously, Joe Biden's going to try to distract the former president from doing that, and that'll be fascinating to watch.
Former President Donald Trump continues to deny his 2020 loss to President Biden without evidence, and the integrity of the election process continued to be challenged on both sides. What lessons have you learned from the past election, and how can you convince skeptical voters now that they can trust the process?
Well, I can speak for the state of Georgia. I mean, we passed one of the strongest elections integrity laws in the country, and we're going to have a secure, accessible, fair election in the state, just like we did in 2022 when I got reelected, and just like we did in our primaries just a few weeks ago. But, you know, I don't think people need to be focused, including the former president, on the past or looking in the rearview mirror. I think he's got a great opportunity to state the case, talk about the issues that people are worried about today. That's what I'm hearing from people. I'm hearing from them every day when they go to the grocery store, every day when they go to the gas pump, every day when they're paying their rent, and they're looking at the disaster at the southern border and other things. And those are the issues that people care about. And I think if Donald Trump stays focused on those and talks about the future and why he's going to make things better than they are right now in this debate tonight, he's going to have a really good night. I think if he gets distracted and goes down rabbit holes of the past, you know, it's going to be really tough for swing voters to move his way.
Trump's Fulton County election interference case has been littered with delays. Of course, calls for the removal of District Attorney Fani Willis and appears to be on track to remain stalled beyond the election. What do you think of how the prosecutor's office is handling the case against the former president?
Well, I got to be very careful about what I say here because I was subpoenaed as a witness in that case, but I will just tell you on behalf of myself and a lot of other Georgians that I hear from, they feel like that case has been very political, just like the case in New York is. But, you know, at the end of the day, I don't think the American people, for the most part, are worried about that. They are focused on pocketbook issues and other serious issues in our state.
You said you did not vote for former President Trump in the Georgia primary, but still would support his ticket for the general election. Explain that. Why, if he didn't earn your vote for the first time, would you vote for him in the general? What's the difference? Well,
listen, when the primary got here, there weren't any candidates left but him, so it didn't really matter. But this race is about the future. I said a long time before the race was ever decided that I was going to support the nominee, whoever he or she was, as I've always done. It's important for us to win the state of Georgia. I'm not worried about, past grievances that the former president may have been mad at me about. This is about the future of our country. This is about making Georgians' lives better. And I just personally believe that the Republican agenda will do a better job of that than we've seen out of Joe Biden and his administration. And so that's why I'm working very hard on the ground to hold our legislative majorities here in Georgia in the House and the Senate. It's also why I'm helping a lot of great U.S. Senate candidates around the country to help Republicans win back the Senate and certainly hold the House. And that goes for helping the top of the ticket here as well with our get out the vote efforts and other things that we're doing with our leadership committee and working with, our team on the ground here in Georgia.
Governor Kemp, we thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. And let's stay in Atlanta now. Our Mary Alice Parks is on the ground there as well. Mary Alice, both President Biden and former President Trump, they know their base. What's their strategy tonight?
Yeah, Lindsay, I'm thinking about the 16% of Republican primary voters in a state like Pennsylvania. Even a month after Nikki Haley dropped out of the race, 16% of Republican voters voted for her instead of Trump. That is the target audience for both campaigns tonight. Trump needs to bring those kinds of voters back into the fold. For him, that might take a little bit of a change in strategy. I've been on the ground with Donald Trump the last 2 weekends, and I can tell you at his campaign events, there's often little policy discussion. He'll talk about crime, immigration, but he doesn't offer a lot of policy prescriptions. I think that his team was really hoping they can turn that around tonight, that he can talk about what exactly he would want to do and will do in the next 4 years if elected. But of course, we've seen Biden really going after those Nikki Haley style voters too, just in the last few days, rolling out that endorsement. Adam Kinzinger, former Republican congressman, obviously that endorsement is aimed, the message is aimed at those conservative voters who are unsure about Trump. Even today, they rolled out this digital ad that has people close to Trump, like his former vice president, Mike Pence, people in his cabinet saying that they don't think he's fit for office. That's been such a big part of the Biden campaign and messaging strategy these last few days, saying that he is fundamentally not able to serve. They're talking about his role on January 6th. They're talking about his election denial. Of course, Lindsay, the tricky part for Biden is that he can't just go after those sort of natural Republican voters. He also has to shore up his own base, especially talk to young voters who so far have been skeptical, at least more skeptical than in past races. Lindsay?
Young voters certainly going to be key. Mary Alice Parks, our thanks to you. And as voters watch this debate of all ages, there are some key issues that will matter most to them. ABC's political director Rick Klein has the most recent polling ahead of this debate.
Lindsay, these are the issues that people told our pollsters with our latest Ipsos 538 poll that they want to hear about in this campaign, the things that are going to shape their vote. You see, inflation, half of voters say that is the #1 issue for them. Immigration, very big as well, followed by political extremism, abortion, and a few others. And here's where Donald Trump could see an advantage. He is favored on those most important issues, including inflation and immigration, got a 10 and a 12-point edge over his rival in trust in handling those issues. It's only when you get a little bit lower down into political extremism and abortion in terms of priorities that Biden starts to open up an edge. So we'll see how that plays out on the debate stage. Now, the race overall is basically a dead heat. It's only 0.2 of a point difference between the two candidates. We see it got a little bit closer, tighter, and a little bit better for Biden just in the last couple of weeks around the criminal conviction of Donald Trump. But that is not a substantial lead in either direction. The battleground states, though, start to tell a little bit of a different story. These are 7 states that are the battlegrounds. Now, Joe Biden carried 6 out of those 7. Right now, in the 538 polling average, he trails in 6 out of the 7. And if these states were to finish exactly in this order, Donald Trump becomes the 47th president. Lindsay?
All right, Rick Klein, a lot of weight on those numbers. Today, the Supreme Court issued new rulings, including one briefly posted yesterday involving emergency abortion care in Idaho. And the justices dealt a devastating blow to a multi-billion-dollar opioid settlement. ABC's Terry Moran is at the Supreme Court.
Today, the official Supreme Court ruling on Idaho's abortion law makes clear women in Idaho can once again obtain emergency abortions if their health is at stake, at least for now.
It's a good start, I guess, but it's not enough.
The court's ruling identical to that mistakenly posted document yesterday. The justice is sending the case back to lower courts, at least temporarily clearing the way for Idaho ER doctors to provide an abortion if necessary to protect the mother's health. It's the first major state abortion case since the court overturned Roe v. Wade 2 years ago. Idaho is one of 21 states that have passed restrictions or bans on abortion since then. The decision coming just hours before tonight's presidential debate, with abortion sure to be a topic. President Biden's campaign quick to blame Donald Trump. Because Trump's Supreme Court majority overturned Roe v. Wade, women are being turned away from emergency rooms and forced to the brink of death before receiving the care they need. If Trump returns to the White House, he and his allies will ban abortion in all 50 states. Doctors in Idaho say the state law put on hold today ignores the realities of emergency care for pregnant women.
We need to be able to have all options on the table in order to protect that person that's in front of us, that pregnant person.
Another huge decision today from the court. The justice is dealing a devastating blow to a sweeping nationwide settlement for victims of the opioid epidemic. The settlement, negotiated for years, involved Purdue Pharma, makers of OxyContin, and members of the billionaire Sackler family, former owners of Purdue. Purdue and the Sacklers had agreed to pay $6 billion to victims, but in exchange, the Sackler family will be shielded from any future liability. But now that deal is off. The court saying U.S. bankruptcy law prevents the Sacklers from being let off the hook. Justice Neil Gorsuch, writing for the court, suggesting there may be a better deal on the horizon. Most of the plaintiffs supported the settlement and were stunned by the court's ruling. Justice Brett Kavanaugh, in a strong dissent, upset that those families won't see any of that money anytime soon, writing, "The decision is wrong on the law and devastating for more than 100,000 opioid victims and their families." Jill Chikowitz lost her brother Scott to an overdose 7 years ago.
It's devastating and it breaks my heart, but we're not quitting. We're standing back up, and we'll get back up and we'll come back stronger.
Our thanks to Terry Moran. And joining us now, ABC News contributor Christina Sinsoon Ramirez and ABC News contributor John Katko. Thank you both so much for joining us tonight. Christina, let's start with you. The debate happening the same night as this ruling from the Supreme Court. How prominent of a role do you expect abortion will play tonight?
I think it's going to play a very prominent role. We're still seeing it poll very high, people very concerned, especially young voters, which are a core demographic that Biden's campaign needs to speak to. And when we look at abortion and the Republican Party and Donald Trump, who put in place the Supreme Court justices that he promised would overturn Roe and fulfilled that promise and took women's rights back 50 years, there's a lot of people, a lot of young people and young women watching across this country to see what Trump will say on abortion and clearly show the distinction between the two candidates on this key issue for the upcoming election.
John, abortion access seems to be a very key issue that the Republican Party can't seem to agree on. Is this a political liability for the party come November?
Yeah, I've always said the less you talk about abortion, the better on the Republican side. People need to understand that. But if you look at the polling, the economy, immigration, issues like that are polling much higher than abortion, which is remarkable to me. So, yes, Christina's right. Abortion is an important issue. It could be a deciding issue among some independents, but in the end, it's not the big issue right now. It's immigration, it's crime, it's economy, it's inflation.
Christina, as we heard Rick Klein earlier, the race is now in a dead heat, but it's major issues like inflation and immigration that Trump is polling higher on. Does this come as a surprise?
Well, I think that Trump has long scored high on those two issues, but I think what will be important for the Biden administration to do is really show the vision and contrast on issues like abortion and the economy. What is the vision that the Biden administration has? Which one speaks more to the pain and the economic realities of most Americans? The Biden administration's policies are actually very popular, talking about taxing the rich and the biggest corporations their fair share, creating a living wage instead of a minimum wage, taking on greedflation, and also investing in clean energy and growing energy economies instead of trying to invest in shrinking ones like Trump proposes to do, who said he would, for $1 billion, do whatever the oil and gas companies wanted to for this election if they would invest in him, and that he would want to slash even more taxes for the ultra wealthy and gut the rights of the American labor movement. So which vision speaks to the majority of Americans, and can Biden really lean on that vision, those policies that are actually very popular with the vast majority of the American public?
John, if there's one thing President Trump needs to do tonight, what is it?
I think it's to stay cool. if he stays under control. I think the vast majority of Americans that are tuning in tonight, there's going to be a ton. It's the most consequential debate in modern history, in my opinion. I think the vast majority of people are going to look to see how both of them conduct themselves much more so than what they say. They want to see Biden. Is he still vibrant? Is he still cognitively sound? Can he handle a 90-minute grueling match like he's going to be into? And can Trump stay under control? Or is he going to be his bombastic old self when everyone says, here we go again with Trump? So I think how they conduct themselves, especially Trump, is going to really see a lot more attention than the actual issues themselves.
Hey, Christina, same question to you. What does President Biden need to do tonight?
Look, there have got to be some key critical moments. Most people are not going to watch the debate. What they're going to watch are viral moments on social media. So how can Biden really punch back? And how does Trump react, especially on the core issues that we know are very unpopular, that is his real frailties: democracy, extremism, abortion, IVF. Where is he going to stand on those issues, and what moments are going to be created to live online many days after this debate that will remind people of what's at stake this election?
All right, we'll be watching intently tonight. John and Christina, we thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Now let's bring in ABC News contributor and presidential historian Mark Updegrove. Thank you for being here, Mark. Of course, we have some new rules in place for this debate, including no live studio audience. The moderators can mute the candidates. What could this mean for how the candidates approach the debate?
Well, I think this is the first time we've seen this, Lindsay, since 1960, since the very first presidential debates, which were between candidates Richard Nixon and John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy ended up winning that election by 0.2 of a percentage point. That sounds familiar because that's exactly what the latest polls show the differences between Donald Trump and Joe Biden in this election. And the important thing to note about 1960, though, was it was the debate that made the difference. It was likely that carried John F. Kennedy to victory in that election, Lindsay. And I think that the consequences of the stakes here are just as high in this election because the race is so close between the two candidates. So I think all eyes are going to be watching these two candidates extraordinarily closely tonight.
This is the earliest in the year a presidential debate has been held, and the first time prior to conventions. How does that change the stakes of this debate for these two and their popularity?
I'm not sure it changes it at all. There will be two debates leading up to the election. Most people tune in at this point. There are a lot of folks who aren't political junkies like we are, and they're tuned out of this. This gives voters an opportunity to see a face-to-face apples to apples comparison between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. So there are a lot of eyes on this, whether it's early or not, Lindsay. I think the impressions that they make will be deep, and voters will be thinking about them when they go to the polls in November.
It's also the first debate with two candidates that have served as presidents, and it's a rematch from 4 years ago. How does past familiarity affect the debate for the candidates and also the audience?
Well, you know, there is no love lost between these candidates. It's been said several times in the coverage today that this is the first time they've seen each other since they were on the debate stage last time in 2020. And that in itself is significant, Lindsay, because normally a president participates in the peaceful transfer of power. President Trump refused to do this as he contested the election in 2020. And then we saw what happened on January 6th. So there is a deep history between these two candidates, and there is no love lost, to say the very least.
Image, of course, is an important part of these debates, and Americans are very familiar with these candidates. Given that, what can each candidate do tonight to try to boost their image?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. Image is the most important political currency that a president or a presidential candidate has. And these debates, Lindsay, are as much about image as they are about substance and policy. People are looking to see whether their impressions of the candidate are valid or not. For instance, back in 1984, when Ronald Reagan's age was in question. He was the oldest presidential candidate in history at that time, at the age of 73. A lot of people were questioning his age, and he came up with a quip that deflected that instantly, and the issue went away. On the other hand, George H.W. Bush in 1992, who was seen to be disengaged and indifferent to the political process, looked at his watch during the debate. That reinforced that impression to his detriment. So image is very important. Joe Biden has to show he has the mental acuity as an 81-year-old to carry on in another term in the presidency. Donald Trump has to show he has the mental stability. And I think, as was mentioned earlier in the broadcast, he has to show he's disciplined and can contain himself. Image is everything in any debate, in particular in this one, Lindsay.
You talked about how in 1960 the debate made all the difference for Kennedy over Nixon. When you're talking about the double haters that we've been hearing a lot about, that Americans who just don't like either of the options there, do you think that this debate tonight is enough to make even those people who are considering staying home, staying on the sidelines, hold their nose and go and vote for one of these men?
One hopes, a vote is the most we can do as citizens is register our choice at the ballot box. That's what a democracy is all about. And I think I would urge any American who is turned off by these candidates to tune in tonight to see who the better of the two is and register his or her choice at the polls. It is so vitally important to continue our democracy, Lindsay.
Historian Mark Updegrove, we thank you so much. Appreciate it. And stay with us. Our complete debate coverage continues, and you can watch the CNN presidential debate right here on ABC News Live. Still much more to get to here on Prime tonight. Coming up, the sanctions against Boeing for what it's being called a blatant violation. But next, charges in the Uvalde school massacre against a former police officer.
Whenever news breaks,
we are here in Israel, a nation at war after that brutal surprise attack by Hamas.
On the ground in Ukraine, reporting from Lewiston, Maine.
The scene of a horrific mass shooting.
ABC News Live is right there everywhere.
From the scene of that deadly missile strike in Dnipro, Ukraine.
Reporting from the earthquake in Turkey.
In Rolling Fork, this tornado tore through this little town.
From the most devastating disaster in Hawaii.
From Charleston, South Carolina, on the 2024 campaign trail.
In Iceland, let's go.
Traveling with the president in Mexico City.
Wherever the story.
From the front lines, from southern Israel.
Outside the Gaza Strip.
In Beirut.
From the FBI.
Reporting from the nurses on the picket line.
Here at 10 Downing Street in London.
Streaming live to you.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is, we're going to take you there.
You're streaming ABC News Live.
ABC News Live.
You're streaming ABC News Live.
ABC News Live, streaming free everywhere. America's #1 streaming news.
First thing in the morning.
There's a lot going on.
We're still in a flash flood warning. To catch you up with what happened overnight. Police in riot gear arresting dozens of protesters.
What's happening today? Escalating tensions in the Middle East.
What people are talking about. The migrant crisis.
Fast, straightforward.
With some fun in between.
Check out the Gator on the 17th hole.
The buzzkill in baseball.
First thing in the morning.
America This Morning.
America's #1 early morning news.
On ABC News Live.
What does it take to be the most watched newscast in America?
We are part of an operation.
Is this our Combat Operations Center?
We're approaching the gate. Militants came in from different directions. Nuclear reactor. So you have a couple loaded and ready to go. The house is destroyed, but the flag.
Not a carry in it.
How important it made the USA. Great work.
Hi, appreciate you.
Thank you.
Ismail?
David.
David.
I'm David Muir.
I know who you are.
You
Watch
do?
you every night.
ABC's World News Tonight with David Muir is America's most watched newscast.
I'm Anthony Mackie. Like most fishermen, sharks used to terrify me. If the shark gets too close, I should hit it in the nose.
Well, you don't need to hit it.
I'm on a quest to find out why these apex predators, that's amazing, are swiping fishermen's hard-earned catches. What? You saw that? Shark Beach with Anthony Mackie.
Woo! That's our fish. Look at that.
Part of the sharkiest 4-week celebration this summer. Shark Fest starts Sunday at 9 on National Geographic.
All right, let the dogs out, please.
I don't think he's going to give you a hard time.
Even if he gives me a hard time, I'm the right guy.
You can handle it.
I want to make sure that we all learn together.
Calm confidence.
Calm, confident, calm, surrender.
Everything that he's taught has become a reality. Yeah. We are so grateful and impressed. I feel like crying. You changed our world.
It is a beautiful thing to see. As you rehabilitate the dog, you also rehabilitate you.
From Texas tonight, we're learning of the first criminal indictment stemming from the school massacre in Uvalde more than 2 years ago. Our Austin affiliate reports a grand jury has filed criminal charges against 2 people for abandoning or endangering a child, which is a state felony. Authorities found officers arrived at Robb Elementary School, waited 77 minutes before confronting the shooter. 19 fourth graders and 2 teachers were killed. Uvalde School Police Chief Pete Arredondo is one of the 2 now potentially facing charges. The Uvalde County Sheriff confirms to ABC News that he is now in custody. There's new trouble for Boeing tonight as it faces tough new sanctions from the NTSB after revealing details of that door plug blowout at 16,000 feet. ABC's Gio Benitez was at the factory when those details were revealed. He has the latest.
Tonight, Boeing under fire. The embattled jet maker facing unprecedented sanctions from the NTSB for publicly disclosing details about that Alaska Airlines door plug blowout, now under federal investigation. In a scathing statement today, the federal agency saying Boeing blatantly violated NTSB investigative regulations and Boeing's signed party agreement with the NTSB by providing non-public investigative information to the media and speculating about possible causes of the January 5th door plug blowout, adding few entities know the rules better than Boeing. At issue, this highly choreographed and controlled tour of Boeing's factory in Renton, Washington on Tuesday, the first since the January incident. Here inside the 737 factory, each plane goes through 10 different stations with entirely different teams, and Boeing says that safety procedures have changed at all of those stations. Boeing telling us that Alaska Airlines jet had defects when it arrived from Spirit Aerosystems, and Boeing workers removed the door plug and bolts to make repairs. But no one ever documented that door's removal. A different crew later moving the plane outside and reattaching the door because of the weather. But Boeing says because the door's removal wasn't documented, those bolts were never put back.
Very transparently, the fact that one employee could not fill out one piece of paperwork in this condition and could result in an accident was shocking to all of us.
That Boeing 737 MAX 9 making more than 150 flights before that door plug flew off 16,000 feet in the air.
Our thanks to Gio Benitez. In Illinois, video captured the moment a giant sinkhole swallowed the center of a soccer complex. Security footage shows the sinkhole opening up, taking down a large light pole and leaving a massive gap where kids often play. Officials say it's at least 100 feet wide and 50 feet deep. Fortunately, no one was on the field at the time. The park and surrounding roads are closed until further notice. NBA star LeBron James is one step closer to fulfilling his dream of playing alongside his son. James's Los Angeles Lakers took his son LeBron Bronny James Jr. with the 55th overall pick in the NBA draft. 19-year-old Bronny played 1 season at USC before entering the draft. He and the 39-year-old LeBron are the first father and son duo to be in the NBA at the same time. Still ahead here on Prime, a former president debating a sitting president for the first time in history. We have more fun facts about debates coming up by the numbers.
What does it take to be the most watched newscast in America?
An operation to capture ISIS fighters.
Is this our Combat Operations Center?
We're approaching the gate now. Militants came in from 4 or 5 different directions. Operational nuclear reactor. So you have a couple loaded and ready to go. The house is destroyed, but the flag, there's not a tear in it. Not a tear in it. How important is this label right here, Made in the USA? Look at your smile. You're proud of this.
I love this.
Great work.
Hi.
Where are you? Where are you?
Appreciate you.
Thank you, David. Good to meet you. Ismail? David.
David.
Yes, yes. I'm David Muir.
I know who you are.
You
Watch
do?
you every night.
ABC's World News Tonight with David Muir is America's most watched newscast. Whenever news breaks,
We are here in Israel, a nation at war.
In Rolling Fork, this tornado tore through this town.
From Lewiston, Maine.
The scene of a horrific mass shooting. From the scene of that deadly missile strike.
ABC News Live everywhere.
In Iceland, let's go.
On the 2024 campaign trail.
Here at 10 Downing Street.
Wherever the story is.
We're going to take you there.
You're streaming
ABC News Live.
ABC News Live.
You're streaming ABC News Live.
ABC News Live, streaming free everywhere.
How do you feel? Gay as hell.
I love it here.
Is this real?
100%.
I think you still look at me that way.
Will you marry me?
I want pageantry that takes months and months to plan.
My girls have
First thing in the morning.
There's a lot going on.
We're still in a flash flood warning.
To catch you up with what happened overnight. Police in riot gear arresting dozens of protesters.
What's happening today? Escalating tensions in the Middle East.
What people are talking about. The migrant crisis.
Fast, straightforward.
With some fun in between.
Check out the Gator on the 17th hole.
The buzzkill in baseball.
First thing in the morning.
America This Morning.
America's #1 early morning news.
On ABC News Live.
Why do so many people start their day here?
From ABC News, this is Start Here.
To be in the know and get a different take on the day's top stories.
A lot of news today, so let's get into it.
Listen now to the Daily News Podcast honored with 4 Edward R. Murrow Awards and see why the New York Times calls it a news podcast worth listening to. Start Here, ABC News. Make it your daily first listen.
Now, that's a part of the story I bet you didn't see coming.
Wherever you get your podcasts, Start Here.
Are you ready to celebrate? Sunday, June 30th, across the country. See, experience some of the nation's greatest Pride celebrations all in one place as they happen live right here on ABC News Live. Pride across America. Celebrate joy, love, freedom, and pride. Sunday, June 30th, starting at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Streaming on ABC News Live and stream on Hulu.
Reporting from the Normandy coast for the 80th anniversary of D-Day, I'm David Muir. Wherever the story is, we'll take you there. You're streaming ABC News Live.
Welcome back. Tonight's presidential debate provides voters with the rare opportunity to see the candidates talking or perhaps shouting at one another, depending on how things go. The 2 scheduled debates between President Biden and former President Trump will be unique in a number of ways, and we're going to take a look at them in tonight's By the Numbers. This debate will forever be remembered as the first time a sitting president is debating a former president. It's also been more than 1,300 days since the 2 men were even in the same room. The last time was during their debate on October 22nd, 2020. There will only be 2 commercial breaks during tonight's 90-minute debate, and it will be the first presidential debate since 1988, Bush versus Dukakis, to not be sponsored by the Commission on Presidential Debates. Debates before that were sponsored by the League of Women Voters or the 3 major TV networks at the time. It will also be the first time since 1960, Kennedy versus Nixon, that there will not be a live audience. And this evening's presidential debate is also the earliest ever by far. Prior to tonight, September 21st, 1980, Reagan versus independent John Anderson. That was the earliest. And even this year's second scheduled presidential debate will be earlier than that. David Muir and I will be hosting that debate right here on ABC on September 10th. And we still have much more ahead here on Prime tonight. A Florida congressman on the VP shortlist ahead of Trump's big night. And what is President Biden's planned pitch to America tonight? One of his advisors joins us. Whenever, wherever news breaks, it's so important to always remember that lives are changed. Here in London, in Buffalo, Uvalde, Texas, Edinburgh, Scotland. From Poland once again tonight. Thank you so much for streaming with us. Ukrainian refugees here in Warsaw. Do you think you'll ever be able to go back home? We're heading to a small community outside of Mexico City. Splintered houses and splintered lives. The magnitude of the devastation. You're streaming ABC News Live. Reporting from Rolling Fork, Mississippi, Santa Fe, New Mexico, Raleigh, North Carolina, the U.S. Capitol, Mayfield, Kentucky, Minneapolis, Mexico, Tongass National Forest, Alaska. Getting you behind the stories as they happen, giving you a front row seat to our world as it plays out in real time, live. ABC News Live Prime. We'll take you there.
Stream ABC News Live weeknights, America's most honored streaming news program, only on ABC News Live. Streaming free right now wherever you stream your news.
First thing in the morning.
There's a lot going on.
We're still in a flash flood warning.
To catch you up with what happened overnight. Police in riot gear arresting dozens of protesters.
What's happening today? Escalating tensions in the Middle East.
What people are talking about. The migrant crisis.
Fast, straightforward.
With some fun in between.
Check out the Gator on the 17th hole.
The buzzkill in baseball.
First thing in the morning.
America This Morning.
America's #1 early morning news.
On ABC News Live.
Whenever news breaks,
we are here in Israel, a nation at war.
In Rolling Fork, this tornado tore through this town.
From Lewiston, Maine.
The scene of a horrific mass shooting.
From the scene of that deadly missile strike.
ABC News Live everywhere.
In Iceland, let's go.
On the 2024 campaign trail.
Here at 10 Downing Street.
Wherever the story is.
We're going to take you there.
You're streaming.
ABC News Live.
ABC News Live.
You're streaming ABC News Live.
ABC News Live, streaming free everywhere.
All right, let the dogs out, please.
I don't think he's going to give you a hard time.
Even if he gives me a hard time, I'm the right guy.
You can handle it.
I want to make sure that we all learn together.
Calm, confident.
Calm, confident, calm, surrender.
Everything that he's taught has become a reality. We are so grateful and impressed.
I feel like crying.
You changed our world.
It is a beautiful thing to see. As you rehabilitate the dog, you also rehabilitate you.
Get ready, America, every Friday.
The hottest trends, styles, and must-have. What's the right stuff to buy right now? I really love that. It's time to buy the right stuff.
Yes.
And save big time, too.
The right stuff.
Fridays on GMA. You're going to love it.
Nightline, the stories that shape your world, that shape your life. Dramatic, stunning, empowering, jaw-dropping. The most powerful stories of our time. Nightline, on right after Kimmel and streaming on Hulu.
What's good to watch? Read? Where can I get a great deal on what I'm just dying to buy? Oh, it's all right here. GMA Life. All the exclusive and buzziest celebrity good stuff. Deals and steals with amazing savings and the coolest lifestyle tips from Good Morning America.
I love that so much.
GMA Life. Streaming weekends on ABC News Live. Your weekend just got a little better with GMA Life.
Welcome back. As we look ahead to tonight's debate against President Biden and former President Trump, we're joined now by Republican Florida Congressman Byron Donalds, who's also on the short list for Trump's VP pick. Congressman, we thank you so much for joining us tonight. What issues do you think will be most important for voters to hear from Trump during tonight's debate?
Securing our border, making sure that we get these conflicts ended around the globe, reestablishing our dominance and our leadership around the globe, and then, of course, our economy, getting inflation under control in a meaningful and serious way. Those are the core issues that are affecting Americans. That is what they are thinking about. That's going to be the focus of Donald Trump tonight.
The Biden campaign is out with a new ad featuring video from January 6th with law enforcement condemning the riot and former President Trump's involvement. How would you recommend the former president answer questions about the insurrection tonight?
Well, look, January 6th was a very tough day for our country, but Joe Biden has been a disaster for the 4 years since then. Prices, inflation, our immigration process has been a complete disaster. We have young girls in our country who have been raped. They have been murdered by illegal aliens in our street. So Joe Biden can talk about January 6th all he wants, but he has been a disaster for the American people since that day. We must have a change in leadership in the White House, and that man is Donald Trump.
A new 538 poll found that almost exactly the same share of likely voters were considering voting for Biden as Trump, about 44% for each. But 18.5% said that they were considering independent candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who failed to qualify for tonight's debate. What tone does Trump need to strike in order to get those jump ball voters on board?
Well, it's not about the tone he needs to strike. If you've watched Donald Trump on the campaign trail the last 2 years, he has been very focused on what is ailing the American people and talking about the solutions that are going to fix the issues that Joe Biden has created with their terrible policy in this administration. I think the other thing tonight is you're going to see a stark contrast with what is important to both men. You've already said it. Donald Trump is focused on the American people going forward. Joe Biden is focused on 2020. Joe Biden is focused on all these things in the past past that have no bearing on what is happening in the lives of the American people today. I believe that's what the 18% are looking for. And even the 44% of independents who are leaning Joe Biden, I think they're gettable as well, including some soft Democrats who are not happy with the direction of America.
You talked about the terrible policies of Joe Biden. What do you think that Donald Trump needs to highlight in particular about Biden's first term?
And number one, you got to start with our southern border. The Mexican drug cartels now have operational control over the southern border. You can ask any border agent down there. I've been to the border 5 times. That's 5 more times than Joe Biden has been. And that's what they have said directly to me. Number 2, fentanyl trafficking is up massively in our country. The number 1 killer in the United States, men ages 18 to 44, is fentanyl overdose. That is a disaster. That's a catastrophe, all created by Joe Biden. His American Rescue Plan, which injected billions and trillions of dollars into our economy that didn't need it, that created a labor shortage, which created an inflation. Joe Biden doesn't want to talk about that. Those are the things that truly do matter. That's where Donald Trump's focus is going to be. I believe that's going to be the measure of success in this debate tonight.
And Congressman, he hasn't been there 5 times as president, but he has been to the border as he's been president. But I'll move on. You were at an event in Atlanta last night aimed at black voters called Congress, Cognac, and Cigars. And according to the Washington Post, things got pretty intense, including criticisms aimed at your comments about fewer black families being fractured under Jim Crow. What's your goal in trying to suggest that there were positives during Jim Crow? And what's the relevance, really, at this point between Jim Crow and Donald Trump?
Well, look, I'm glad that you asked this. This is important. When we were talking about in Philadelphia, and actually again last night in Atlanta, is talking about that even through the persecution of the Jim Crow era. Persecution, by the way, brought by Southern Democrats, because that's the actual history. Even during that persecution, black families were held together because they were trying to protect themselves, build for themselves. It was actually the Great Society under Lyndon Johnson, the welfare benefit programs that did not want black fathers in homes. That's when you started to see the decline in the marriage rate in black families. It continued even through Joe Biden's 1994 crime bill, eviscerating homes once again. The marriage rate in black families has declined. What you're seeing in America today is a rise in black families, a rise in the marriage rate. That's a good thing for black families, a great thing for our country. But now the fundamental question is, which policy set is going to help these families thrive today and going forward? It's without a question. It is the economic agenda. It is the security agenda. It's the American First agenda of Donald J. Trump, because families are struggling. Right here in Atlanta, you also heard that when I was here talking to black men and black women in this great city here in Georgia.
Congressman Donalds, we thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
And joining us now with more on what we can expect from President Biden's pitch to America starting tonight through the election is his campaign co-chair, Cedric Richmond, who has also served as a senior advisor to the president and in the House of Representatives for a decade representing Louisiana. Great to have you here. Give us the inside scoop on how the president plans to differentiate himself tonight from the former President Trump.
Well, the president's going to show the American people that every day he wakes up thinking about them, their needs, their safety, their security, their freedoms, and what he plans to do to keep moving this country in the right direction. He will point out the contrast with former President Trump, that every day former President Trump wakes up worrying about himself. And he'll also have to remind the people of what he inherited when he took office. The country had lost millions of jobs. Unemployment was around 6%. And he had to come in and right the ship. It took a lot of hard work, but he was able to do it.
What issues, more specifically, do you think that the president will hit as a way to remind voters that they have a really important choice to make in November?
Well, of course, the moderators will take care of most of that, but the president will draw sharp contrast on abortion and a woman's right to choose. The president will draw contrast on tax breaks for the ultra-rich and corporations, which President Trump promotes, and the president promotes cutting costs for hardworking Americans, everyone who makes under $400,000 a year. You'll also see a distinction on national security, and the list really goes on. But the president is prepared to make sure that the people understand the fundamental differences between former President Trump and President Biden.
As you well know, voters are concerned in many cases that neither former President Trump nor President Biden, who's 81, can do this job for another 4 years. What's your response to that?
Well, it's not about the age of the candidates. They're similar ages. It's about how old their ideas are. And President Biden's ideas will take us into the future, cutting health care costs, investing in families, making sure that we lift people up from the bottom up and the middle out. And President Trump's ideas are old. He wants to go backwards. And I think that that's what the people are going to see.
Preaching to your own choir, of course, is easy, but there are millions of voters who are either independents or are looking at third-party candidates or who may not vote at all. What would be the president's pitch directly to those voters?
Well, he has a number of pitches, but one, our democracy is on the line. He has been a stable force as president. He united NATO, united the West against Russian aggression. He's focused on families. He is worried about and passed the Inflation Reduction Act. He worked with Republicans to pass the infrastructure bill so that we can improve our roads and bridges and bring high-speed internet to both urban and rural communities. The president has a list of accomplishments that I think he will go through, but he will also talk about his vision for the future. So you will see a president talk about a record, but you will also see him talk about his vision.
You know, last question to you. With regard to some of the traditionally loyal voters to the Democratic Party in particular, this go around, according to polls, we have blacks, Hispanics, young people who are saying they're not so sure that they may even vote, let alone vote for Joe Biden. Are you concerned about losing those demographics in particular this go around?
Well, we're going to speak to them, and that's what campaigns are for. We're going to remind our young black voters that black unemployment is at an all-time low, black entrepreneurship is at an all-time high, that we've closed the racial wealth gap more than any other administration in the history of this country. We reduced violent crime and gun crime. So we have a message, we have accomplishments that we can talk to those voters about. And when we talk about young voters, our efforts to combat climate change and clean up the environment, all of which are things they care about, all of which are things that we need to talk to them about. And then for good measure, throw in our work to reduce the debt that they have by relieving some student loan debt. And that's what campaigns are for. So you go out and you talk to the voters and you let them know what you have done and you let them know what you want to do and your vision for their future. And so we're going to make them understand that this race is just as importantly more about them than it is about us. And it's about their future. And so that's what they need to hear, and that's what we're going to talk to them about.
Biden campaign co-chair Cedric Richmond, we thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And that is our show for tonight. I'm Lindsay Davis. Stay with us. Our complete debate coverage continues, and you can watch the CNN presidential debate right here on ABC News Live.
What does it take